On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, despite the perfect start, is there any concerns about this Thunder team?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, beat member and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO Thunderpod. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. We're here for you every single morning, every single day, talking Thunder basketball, including fresh off of a 7-pod week because of the schedule back-to-back. But today, we're joined by Michael Martin at Michael on Sports on Twitter, at Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube to discuss the Thunder's historic 6-0 start. First time in franchise history. Michael, how are you doing today?
Doing great. No, can't really complain about too much. 6-0 start. Hasn't been done in franchise history. Living the life. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'd be doing a lot better if they didn't have a 9:30 back-to-back. But beggars can't be choosers. Still a really fun start to the season and a fun start to the show brought to you by FanDuel. You can get started this year with a big return at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet by visiting FanDuel.com. Michael, the Thunder are literally perfect in the win-loss column, but is there any sort of concerns or questions that have developed for you over the first 2 weeks of the year?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any massive concerns, but I would keep an eye on a few of these things. First would probably just be sort of J-Dub's aggressiveness. I love that Dub's a great teammate and wants to get guys involved, but this is something that goes back to even last year in the playoffs that you and I talked about, of just him needing to take over, in my opinion, more of those non-Shai minutes and really be the primary scorer and initiator. I think Dub does a great job of giving everyone touches, but often I feel like he prioritizes that over getting his own. So I'd like to see him get downhill a little bit more. I think that's where it all starts. I actually did the numbers, and he's taken 20 shots at the rim so far this season, 23 shots from 3 to 10 feet, and 27 shots from 3. So I think some of it is just being on the perimeter a little bit too much. I think he can turn it around. We all know he can shoot, but I think that would be my concern number one.
Yeah, I think that's really my only concern until this team gets healthy and we can have more questions and kind of go back and forth. I will give a different one coming up, but this is the most pressing. I think that you can kind of get swept up too much in the first couple of games. And, for example, the first 2 games the Thunder shot dreadfully. I mean, that was like peach basket level stuff from 3. But since then, they've shot better than they shot a year ago on more attempts than they shot a year ago. So I think that we can look at this team, and whenever they only score 105 points and the offense labors at times, we can just fall back to what we saw early, like, oh, they're just not shooting well. Well, this entire second week, they've shot the ball really well. I think that everyone is playing up to their standards except for the stars for various reasons. For Chet, he was an MVP level player last week. That of course was not going to continue for the entire season, but their aggression was very hard offensively over this back-to-back. Now, there's a reason for that. He, of course, had to play a back-to-back, a second 3-game and 4-night stretch as the lone big man and against 2 traditional bigs. So I have no concern about that, but when you're looking at why was the offense so messy? Why aren't they clicking like they were a year ago? Well, take last night, for example. Chet has like 10 points on 10 shots. J-Dub has, 13 points on 13 shots, whatever it was. Like, those 2 guys match their points with the shot attempts. And it's a star-driven league. I think that, like, Cason Wallace and Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe, I think that the only one of those rotational pieces that you can pick at right now offensively is Caruso, who is a 40% three-point shooter, not showing it so far this season. Other than that, everyone on the periphery of this roster is playing either at their level or above the level we previously saw. It comes down to Chet and J-Dub have to flank SGA as like go-to scorers, and Chet did that masterfully in week 1. He did that masterfully Wednesday. He's had 2 bad nights, and then you connect that with what you talked about of Jalen Williams and how he's not gotten going offensively, and he's not been as an aggressive force at the rim, and that's how you get to kind of a sputtering offense at times, but they're still able to get 6 straight wins and 6 straight lopsided wins. So calling it a concern for the act of this show, I think is appropriate, but just to be clear, it's a very limited concern because we have a much larger sample size of all three of those guys, Shai, J-Dub, and Chet, performing at a high and efficient level offensively than we do of these last whatever games of J-Dub not scoring the ball well, and these last 2 games of Chet not scoring the ball well. So it'll all work itself out, but it does start with J-Dub. And the fact of the matter is, for this offense to click, he's got to be better.
Yeah, I would agree with you. This is a 6-game sample size. It could be in January, February. Doesn't matter. It's still 6 games. And I think he probably will turn it around, but there's just a lot of possessions where not just him, where guys are trying to hunt the perfect shot rather than just a good shot. And I feel like that puts them in some late shot clock situations that you just don't want to be in. But for Dub, yeah, I would like to see him just hunt his own shot a little bit more. He's not a selfish guy, so even if while he's doing that, I think he's still going to get the assists. But just him trying to water all the plants right now, I just don't think is what's best for the offense.
And I really have, limited concerns because even in this stretch where he's not played to his standard, he's also had some really good flashes, like the drive against the Clippers where it looked like he was going to tear the rim down, and he stops and has a delayed dump off to Dort for an easy N1. Like, that's why you work on your playmaking, you work on your passing and decision-making and reading the floor better. I just think that it's a combination of, for Shai, he's clearly taking more threes. He's clearly trying to work on that part of his game. For J-Dub, he's clearly trying to evolve as a playmaker, which they desperately need in the playoffs, both of those things. But it does look different in the regular season than what you're accustomed to, and that's why I think whenever change happens, then it starts to elevate the concern level for the fan base and the people on social media and stuff. But I just don't think I'd be too concerned. I don't love the J-Dub only minutes. I wonder, though, if the process of that, of having J-Dub out there without Chet, without Shai, is to get the other guys acclimated to playing off of J-Dub, and then once you have iHeart back, you're going to be putting J-Dub in charge of, running that secondary unit, playing off of Isaiah Hartenstein, which I think will be a fantastic duo. It's just you got to wait to get there until whenever he's going to return.
Yeah, I don't think either of us doubt that J-Dub is capable of doing this. More so, like you mentioned, Shai with the threes, this seems like just something he's testing out. He'll sort of get acclimated. As for Dub, I just don't feel like they have to be mutually exclusive things between him playmaking and him hunting his own shot. Like, as I said earlier, he's a really good downhill attacker. The Thunder's offense is very, very much predicated in a lot of ways off just drive and kit game. That is just something that's going to be very, very easy to do. But yeah, I'm interested to see how it sort of evolves. Like you mentioned, they are going to need him as a secondary playmaker and shot creator in the playoffs. So it's all about the longer term, I guess, build here. But just in the aggregate of just in the near future, I'd like to see him be a little bit more aggressive.
So we've seen some changes even in the 6-0 start. Of course, the defense has been way better than it was a year ago, which is saying a lot because a year ago, they were one of the best defenses in the NBA. But offensively, we've discussed the changes at the top. There's also been a change in philosophy of the starting lineup. We're going to discuss that coming up. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at BetterHelp. Check out BetterHelp today because you want to go there and get started. Many people believe that they can benefit from therapy. I think it's a great tool. And sometimes what hinders people from actually going and using that tool is having to try to find a brick and mortar place to go to and find a local therapist. And then you kind of push it to the side. At least I have in the past of like, well, I just don't have the time for it. I can't really get out there today. But that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is there for you because it's entirely online, entirely suited around your schedule. So go there right now and check it out and receive the benefits of therapy at BetterHelp.com. Entirely online, entirely flexible around your schedule. You fill out this brief questionnaire and they match you with a licensed therapist. Hopefully, that's a great match. If not, you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. Go there right now to BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Here with Michael Martin at Michael on Sports on Twitter. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, a stark difference from last year to this year was that last year, if Shai, Giddey, Dort, Dub, and Chet were healthy, that was your starting five. This year, it's been that of like an MLB starting rotation where okay, it was Joe opening night, Wallace, Wiggins. Let's flip back the Rolodex to those same three guys rotating in. Now they've all gotten repeat starts, and we'll see what they do on Monday against Orlando. I asked Mark about this. I think that the philosophy is sound of wanting to get guys opportunity to play in starting minutes, because for a team like this that's capable of running many teams off the floor, frankly, the only time you're guaranteed important high leverage minutes for a team this good, just like the Celtics, just like other great teams around the NBA, is at the opening tip. And getting them accustomed to playing off your core four is massive as well, because you want to be able to close with a variety of lineups when these games get tight, when these games get high pressurized down the stretch of the season and the postseason, etc. So I understand the philosophy, but I think that the experiment is interesting, mainly because, in my opinion, there's like a very exclamation point jumping out at you from this three of who should start, and we haven't even seen who I think would be the best starter with this group get a start yet. But what do you think so far about the exploration and experiment of the starting five?
I like it. I think they're going to continue to run with it, of just sort of, I think they like that malleability and flexibility of, it's not a thing where the Thunder are going, we're trying to figure out who the fifth guy is. We don't know. They have options and they can just kind of cycle through depending on the matchup. I think all three guys have done really well in their starts, but I would say my favorite of the three would definitely be Cason, just his fit with the starters. He fits really, really well. Obviously, if you can relieve Shai and Dub of some of those primary perimeter defensive assignments, with Dort and Cason taking those on, that's going to go a long way. And offensively, Cason brings a lot more playmaking and off the dribble, just punched in Wiggins or Joe. And then I just think that he really, really fits in with them. And then Wiggins and Joe, they have been good as starters, but I think they are at their best and most impactful coming off the bench. Joe being a microwave six man who can just green light from three, and then Wiggins sort of similar to Caruso, who just gives this giant boost of energy off the bench.
Yeah, I would agree that I think that of these three so far, Cason's been the best starter. And I think that that has less to do with Joe and Wiggins as individuals, but more so to do with game flow, of the natural progression of the game. First and foremost, if you have Joe off the bench as this microwave scorer, that's going to help an offense that at times can get stagnant, especially with that secondary unit. And with Wiggins, I just think that his value is so much better off the bench, which I know that everybody wants to start no matter what everyone says publicly. Starting is cool. Starting is a big deal. But what Wiggins can give you as a guy who can routinely get to his spots as a driver and can switch to nearly every position on the floor defensively, that's not really replicatable for that secondary unit. And what Cason gives you in the starting five is tone setting. And you talk all the time about how in those first two games when they were shooting really poorly, what helped them get blowout wins was their defense and turning defense into offense. Cason allows you to do that from the opening tip. And I think that Joe's gotten much better as a defender over the course of his time in OKC. I think that Wiggins is a good defender. They're just not the level of Cason, which is obviously no knock, because Cason has potential to be an all-defensive player as he progresses throughout his career. So I just think that either Cason, and we haven't seen it yet, but I still am holding stock in Caruso being a really good starter. I just think that you've got to kind of go all in on what's made you so good this year, and that is your defense and that is your intensity, and take teams out of the game early.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Cason's a big part of that. You mentioned the intensity of just, they're picking up guys full court, they're trapping, they're doing a lot of these things, and those are two of the more pesky defenders in the league between him and Lou. So I'm really excited to see Cason just progress. He's gotten a lot better, in my opinion, off the dribble and improves as a playmaker. We're seeing him do a lot more than just stand in the corner and shoot threes. As for Joe, like I mentioned earlier, and as I agree with you, I think he's best used as a changeup off the bench. I feel like it kind of just neutralizes his effect as a shooter when you start him in a few ways. Obviously, he's still going to be a good shooter in the starting five, but I think it just gives it a different element to the team. And then Wiggins, you hit the nail right on the head. I think that he's best used off the bench and sort of just masking in a bunch of different roles of sort of whatever the team needs, and I don't think that's used best in the starting lineup.
Yeah, and I just think that when you look at even Cason and how he fits offensively, we obviously were very defensive focused there, but offensively, he can make a loud impact without getting shot attempts. And in those first X amount of minutes before you go into your bench, me personally, I'd want Shai, J-Dub, and Chet getting as many shots as possible. Whereas while Joe and Wiggins can do this, they're most efficiently used offensively whenever you swing the ball over to Wiggins and he takes you down to the low block. He's able to get a roll, or he's taking an open three whenever the ball movement's there. Joe, you saw what he can do with that step back triple, which was really the dagger last night against the Clippers. Like, those two guys offensively, yes, they fit. Yes, they work. This team's 6-0. Like, we got to keep saying that. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I just think that it's more seamless whenever you have a guy like Cason Wallace handling the duties. But this team is 6-0, and we can rave all day long about them. I mean, Kevin Garnett went on his show and said that this team has 11 guys who are absolute dogs, which you got to tend to agree. But we still have not seen Isaiah Hartenstein, the biggest free agency signing in franchise history. We haven't even seen Jay Will or Kenrich, who I think both would help this team, if nothing else, providing that front court depth. And I think that both those players have elements to their game that this team is missing right now. But sticking on Hartenstein, kind of lost in the shuffle of all the praise, is that this team not only is not clicking offensively right now to their highest order, they don't have their highest order rotation yet.
Yeah, Hartenstein was getting like all defense votes last year, and he's going to be your second unit center. He's going to have a massive impact on this team. And, Mark mentioned this earlier whenever he first got that injury of, injuries are never a good thing to happen. There's never a good time. But Hartenstein, I guess it would be a good time because he got those preseason minutes in where he understands the Thunder system and how he kind of fits. He's got minutes with the guys on the roster, so they sort of know how to play off of him. But I think he's going to be massive for this team, especially off the bench, with some of those playmaking duties that we mentioned with J-Dub. I think that you can see a lot more of that from Hartenstein at the elbow, high post, and I think it's going to unlock just a lot of things for the second unit.
I mean, for as good as this defense is, you're going to get a rim protector to give you 48 minutes of rim protection between him and Chet and help you on the glass. And, like, go look at Jalen Brunson, and I'm by no means calling Jalen Brunson, Mavs legend, a Isaiah Hartenstein merchant, but look at the buckets he's getting. Look at the numbers he's producing with and without Hartenstein. And again, I'm not saying that like he needs Hartenstein to perform at the level he performed at last year, but just look at how much easier it was to get to his spots last year and get to easy buckets last year compared to what it looks like this year. Like, that in and of itself is going to free up a lot of the offense, I think, because again, I'll say it, they didn't shoot well in the first two games. They've shot really well since then. It's not a shooting problem as much as like that's the crutch now because of the first two games. It's not a shooting problem. I think that they need to get back to their identity at times of getting downhill and being able to score. And what helps you do that is a screen setter like Hartenstein, who none of these guys like have ever played with a screen setter of that ability. Like, that is a special creator off the ball.
Yeah, I agree with you. The shots are falling more frequently now. I think it's just sort of the flow of the offense just feels kind of sluggish at times, and that's what it's really standing out to fans. And I'd agree with that. And I think Hartenstein's going to have a massive impact, like you mentioned, the screening. It's a massive thing from Brunson, and if we want to see J-Dub get downhill, it's going to make it a lot easier if his man is just walled off by Hartenstein. And he's a good roller, so we can see some of that two-man game. He's good on the short roll, so he can kick it out to shooters. And defensively, yeah, having at all times one of those two guys protecting the rim is going to be massive. Like, hats off to Oos and the small ball lineups for like holding it down, but this is not what the Thunder had in mind when they constructed this roster, is having those guys sort of anchor those units. Like, they wanted Hartenstein out there, so I'm really excited to see what he looks like. I think it's going to maybe not come out just like guns blazing. I think it may need a little bit of time to adapt, but I think it's going to be awesome.
And we'll see if that changes up the starting lineup rotation at all, or if they stick with these three guys, or if they finally put in Caruso. There's just still so much to learn. I know we feel like we have everything figured out 6 games in, but what a long season ahead. What a long homestand ahead coming up. And it gets broken up a little bit Wednesday, but really starting on Monday, it's pretty much all Thunder basketball all the time. You can subscribe to Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube and Locked On Thunder on YouTube and every podcast place in the world to get daily Thunder content. Coming up, they're 6-0, but they're not going to go 82-0. When is the Thunder's first loss of the season? But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Check out FanDuel today. Get ready to tackle the NFL action, the college football action, and NBA at America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's there to give you the place that you need to bet on the NFL, college, NBA, all in one place, whether it's live lines or over-unders, spreads, etc. Go to FanDuel.com right now to join today. And the Thunder do play the Magic today, who are in progress against the Dallas Mavericks. So there's no official line for this game, but the early line from FanDuel is the Thunder are favored by 12.5 points with the Magic on the second night of back-to-back and without Paulo Banchero. If you believe another lopsided win is in order, go check out FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Joining us today is Michael Martin at Michael on Sports. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, when is it going to happen? When is that first loss going to happen? And I'm here to tell you, when it does, social media, despite the franchise best start, will be a dark place that night because the first loss always hits the hardest.
It does, and some of it is just they've been playing so well that it's going to be sort of a shocker. But like you said, they're not going to go 82-0. But I do think it's going to take some weird things sort of for that first loss. I don't think anyone's going to really like this, but I'm going to say their first loss is November 8th at home against the Houston Rockets. I don't think it's because they have just this tremendous matchup, but we've been watching this team, covering them long enough. Since 2020, the Rockets just sort of have this weird magic that they get against the Thunder, where they either get super, super hot, or the Thunder have the worst shooting performance of their lives. And I'm just sort of feeling that in the ground, and dogs can sense tornadoes or something. I can sort of sense this. Well, that's not a great comparison, but I think that the Rockets provide sort of a just weird matchup. I don't think it's to their advantage, but they have a lot of athletes similar to the Thunder, and I think that's probably where they get their first loss.
So that was my answer, but I don't want to double up. I'm going to go November 6th in Denver. You have the travel to break up a homestand. You just kind of want to be home because you've been on the road a little bit this season, and it's the altitude. It's a medium-ish late tip, of course, local at 8 o'clock instead of 7. And Denver, I don't like using this excuse because they should have been motivated plenty on opening night. But, I think that they're going to be motivated if that helps them. And they do have the best player in the world, and it is taxing. I mean, I don't think that it's a thing, whenever people say that, I think that you immediately jump to, Chet's frame. I don't think it's a Chet's frame thing. I think if whoever you believe is a traditionally just chiseled center with the perfect build, if you ask them to be the only center on the team for the first 6-7 games and then go play the best player in the world twice in that stretch, then yeah, they're going to be taxed. They're going to be tired, especially whenever you're asking them to play 2-3 games in 4-night stretches in there as well. So I just think that Denver will get it done Wednesday. But I was going to pick Houston as well because there's just something about Houston where, like you said, the Thunder always underperform, and then their fans just go crazy on Twitter. Clemente Almanza has another war to fight on Friday, so hopefully the general rests up. But Michael, this is a fun start to the season. This is a fun pod. What's coming up on Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube?
We've got some more breakdowns and spotlights coming in. I know I teased this on the last couple pods. My bet on Chet video of just sort of his rise this season as we're seeing him with more on-ball opportunity, shot creation. So that will come in this coming week, which I'm really, really excited for. And then just a few more breakdowns I'm sort of trying to plan, but you never know with the Thunder and how they sort of change up with the schedule, which will be released next.
So keep an eye out. By doing that, you can just go to Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube, subscribe, and turn on that bell notification. You can do the same for Locked On Thunder on YouTube and any other podcasting platform that you have. Check out Thunder on SI as well. And until tomorrow after the Magic game, be good and be good to one another.